Located in Southeast Louisiana, less than an hour away from both Baton Rouge and New Orleans, sits the great parish of Tangipahoa. Over 130,000 call it home. Long and narrow in shape, the parish is 51 miles long and 18 miles wide. The parish's northern border shares the state line with Mississippi. On the southwest, the parish is bordered by Lake Maurepas, while on the southeast lies Lake Pontchartrain. Amite City is the parish seat, and Interstates 55 and 12 cross in the parish's largest city, Hammond. The name Tangipahoa comes from an Akalopisa word meaning ear of corn, or those who gather corn. The parish's motto is out of 4, 1, which references Tangipahoa's origin. In March of 1869, the parish was formed from territory taken from the parishes of Livingston, St. Helena, St. Tammany, and Washington. This also makes Tangipahoa the youngest of the Florida parishes.
We can be proud of everything that we have here in Tangipahoa Parish. There's always something to do, whether it's one of our year-round festivals that we have, our museums, our downtowns. If you've been to one of our downtowns lately, you'll see just how bustling it is. The nightlife is alive. Our restaurants are wonderful, and we're a foodie destination these days, so people do love to come here and visit Tangipahoa Parish.
Well, I think it's kind of a cliche, but it's the truth. Our people are just incredible. Our motto is move here. It does mean about people moving here, but it really talks about what our people do whenever something needs to happen. They move, and whether it's having fun at all the fairs and festivals, or whether we're responding to a flood or a neighbor's fire, we just move whenever things need to happen. And our citizens are just incredible that way. The geography, how easy it is to get to so many places and get to, whether it be 45 minutes to New Orleans or Baton Rouge or to Jackson, Mississippi in a couple hours. We have the interstates, we have the railroads, we have all those assets that make our parish incredible. Then you throw in that we have an unbelievable university, we have a great community college. We just kind of have it all.
I always say if you don't like one area of Tangipahoa, just move to another part of it and you'll get a change. We have the hills in the north, we have the swamp in the lower end, and everything in between, so it's just a great place to live.
Well, home to us wasn't just the state of Louisiana, it was Tangipahoa Parish. It's getting back up in and around Amite. I wouldn't trade with anybody where I grew up. I wouldn't trade my parents, my siblings, my friends, my schools, my town. I wouldn't trade anything. It was a wonderful experience for me, and I know that it remains a wonderful experience for so many others.
I was born and raised here. I live about 10 miles from where I was raised at. I taught for 29 years at Narrator High School. These are my neighbors, these are my family, they're friends. It's a friendly place.
Future Tangipahoa Parish looks very great. We're making new plans, preparing for the new subdivisions and the development and all the growth that we're having. We have a lot of growth.
We have a good, steady population, and it's continuing to rise. We have good industries that produce nice jobs. This is the clean parish, and I tell people all the time, why you moved to Tangipahoa Parish? Well, you moved because the grass is a little greener and the wine is a little sweeter. So come on to Tangipahoa Parish, we're growing.
One of the things we always try to remind people is that, history began before the arrival of the Europeans, and it's understandable that people often forget that, because one of the big weaknesses of the Native Americans was they left no written records. Very few of the tribal groups had an actual written language. So we're often trying to piece together their past and their historical development through artifacts and other things like that, and written records of observers of them, like the initial French who came in, Spanish explorers, others, and they weren't always favorable to the Native Americans. So we do our best with putting together, but one of the things that does tell us that they were here in significant numbers in what later became Tangipahoa Parish was the residuals of settlements. And people are familiar with like middens, which are mounds of mussel shells in this region, for example. And among these tribes, real development, substantive development, began with what we call the Petite Nations. And that included the Bayugula, the Acolapisa, other groups like that, the Tunica, that people have heard of in these areas. One of the smaller groups, though, were the Tangipahoans. And they were actually located at the mouth of the Tangipahoa River, and they were one of the groups that contributed to the big Bayou Jasmine find and everything nearer to Manchac, because all of these groups, though they tried to have territory that they called their own, they had to be a little bit itinerant because they had to move where the food was often. And of course, as we know, flooding and different things like that could relocate them very quickly. But they were developing in this area when the initial Europeans arrived, and they had interaction with them, they traded with them, they served as scouts for them, they engaged in battles with them and everything. There was some fierce fights between the Native Americans in this area and the initial Europeans who intruded into the area.
When Iberville and Bienville were going through the lakes, there were 7 Indian tribes that spanned from roughly where Slidell is into St. James, St. John Parish. I'm saying Indian tribes, but they were probably not much more than good-sized villages. Over time, during the colonial period, there was a great deal of warfare, and ultimately the Choctaw controlled what we think of as St. Tammany Parish today, but of course, that extended all the way to the Tangipahoa River.
I don't think a lot of people realize one of the great, to me, voyages of discovery happened right here in our backyard, 25 miles away. We know about Lewis and Clark, we know about Father Marquette and Joliet and LaSalle and many others, but we don't know that much about the intrepid Lemoyne brothers, Iberville and Bienville, and briefly here's the story. After LaSalle claimed everything drained by the Mississippi River for France, he went back to France and he told about this fabulous river he had found. And he got an expedition together to come back, find the river again, and establish a colony that would give France a stronghold here in this area. Well, he never did find the river. He had came to a sad ending in the New World, and then they sent Iberville and Bienville, Sœurs de Lemoyne, to Louisiana. They landed around Biloxi and began to look for the mouth of the Mississippi River. And sure enough, they found it, and they sailed up the Mississippi River. They went as far up as Baton Rouge, where they saw the famous red pole. Apparently it had blood on it, and they called it Bâton Rouge, which means red stick. But here's the interesting part. They met with some Indians, and how they communicated, I have no idea. And they told the Indians pretty much where they had come from, and they said, we know that place, and we know a way to get back that's a shortcut. So Iberville, with a few of his men and some of the Indians in canoes, left Baton Rouge through Bayou Manchac, and they came to what's now the Amite River, which led them into Lake Maurepas, and they named Lake Maurepas after one of their sponsors. They went through South Pass, Manchac, 25 miles from Hammond, and all the way across Lake Pontchartrain, and got back to the area around Biloxi and beat Bienville back, who had gone back down the river by ship. And to me, it's just absolutely remarkable that the 2 days out of Baton Rouge, these Indians could have overwhelmed them, but he talks about seeing a herd of buffaloes right here where we're sitting today. To me, that's preposterous, but so apparently they were living this far south in 1699.
The first person who left us real written records of what we know as Tangipahoa Parish, of course, was Iberville and those with him. And Iberville referred to it as one of the prettiest spots I have ever seen. And this is just his observations as he's cruising through Lake Maurepas and into Lake Pontchartrain, and they see this area. And so that stimulated notions of that this can be a very good area to settle in and develop. The problem was, it was wild, and except for the few Native Americans around who weren't particularly happy about new people moving in, it was completely undeveloped. So this region, the region we know as Tangipahoa Parish, which develops, as the long parish we see today, eventually it's going to become that, along the Tangipahoa River, was very slow pattern of development. There were very few those settlers that came into the area. In fact, during the French period, there was very minor settlement at all, largely concentrated along the lakefront area and in a few small settlements moving towards the north, but not much. It was during the Spanish period that more settlers began to come into the area, and then during the later British period, even more so did. And they settled in a couple of communities, one of which was called Uncle Sam. And that today, of course, is Independence. There was another smaller settlement near what we call Amite today, and it even was referred to as Amite, meaning where two roads met, and it was spelled A-M-E-E-T. Further north, you had Tangipahoa, which had a few houses and settlements there, but there was nothing that we would really call towns, and really, with the exception possibly of Uncle Sam. You might call it a small community in what we know today as Tangipahoa Parish, because you can't speak about Tangipahoa Parish because of its peculiar pattern of being created that without talking about its prehistory. And what really was the impetus to settlement in this area was the arrival of the railroad. And when finally, after years of negotiating, years of fights in the state legislature and everything, they finally managed to get through funding in support of what would become known as the New Orleans-Jackson Railroad.